I am, go ahead and have a seat. I am so blessed to be here this morning and to see so many familiar faces. And you know, there's nothing more encouraging than to see people who are still going forward for the Lord. And I'm blessed. My socks, I don't have any, but they're blessed. I'm blessed by socks off. Um, that's why I don't have any. But I'm just, you know, my husband and I started the church back in 1981, and we came with just a vision and a dream and wanting to do a work for the Lord. And it was through the ministry there in Hayward that Pastor Jose and Kim were reached, and boy, did God do a miracle in their lives. He really did. And it's like, give the Lord a hand, don't patty cake. There were times where like, I don't know. But, you know, God is able to do much more than we even ask or think. And I'm just blessed that they have continued to go forward and continue to go over obstacles. And almost 12 years ago, the Lord called my husband home after 22 years of pastoring there in the city of Hayward. And I was like, well, now what do I do? You know, my husband is gone, and the Lord opened up an opportunity for me to become the senior pastor there in Hayward. And so I was able to pastor that church for 8.5 years. And 3 years ago, I turned it over to my son. And so now my son is doing it, and he's doing an awesome job. And so, you know, what a legacy. You know, my husband, me, my son, then hopefully my grandson will just pick it up from there. And, you know, it's just, it's a great feeling to be able to serve the Lord and to see your children serve the Lord. And that's why my favorite scripture, well, one of them is 3 John 4, where I have no greater joy than to know that my children are walking in truth. And that has been something that I have put on my walls since my children were kids, and I have continued to believe it and pray it. And so that is my joy today, because my children are continuing to walk in truth. And, you know, it hasn't always been easy, but together as a family, we have weathered a lot of storms, a lot of difficulties, a lot of heartache. But what are you going to go back to? What else is there? You know, I accepted Christ when I was 17 years old. Never got to go into a disco. They weren't discos, now they're clubs. Never got to go into a bar. I didn't get to do a lot of stuff. And yet, from what I've heard, I didn't miss anything. I missed absolutely nothing. So, you know, it's just, there was nothing to leave. Even though the road has not always been easy, there's nothing to go back to. Once you've burned your bridge with the world, there's no bridge to go over. You can't go back. You can't try to build it. It takes too long. You just got to just stay where you're planted and do what God has called you to do. And so I'm grateful to the Lord that, you know, being able to serve him these last almost 43 years, he's been faithful to me. And I turned 60 yesterday, and I cannot believe I got here. It's like, you know, when I was growing up, there was a saying, don't trust anybody over 30. And then it was 40. And then it was 50. Now I'm like, okay, now it's 70. Don't trust anybody over 70. But I'm so grateful for the health that the Lord has given me, and my excitement to continue to serve the Lord and spread the gospel. And one of my husband's favorite scriptures was that he that wins souls is wise. And that has been something that I have continued to hide in my heart and continue to go forward. And I was excited to hear what the worship team did, because that's what it's all about. It's about taking the message that you hear today and taking it home and taking it to the streets, and letting the Word of God become real, because you know, Sundays, everybody knows Sundays. For me, when I was not serving the Lord, Sundays was the most boring day. Wasn't it boring without God? It's like there's nothing on TV, there's nothing to do. I mean, it was just boring. And now with the Lord, there's always something to do. But there are people who especially need to hear the love of God that you got. So, anyway, I heard that you've been having an exciting month of family. And so I kind of wanted to share on family. And I wanted to bring it through a parenting viewpoint. Now, I know some of you are not parents. And when I was young and I was not married, I used to hear marriage sermons. And I used to say, okay, I got to put that one on the shelf. Because one day I'm going to get it off the shelf. It's going to be apply to me. And then I'd hear parenting, oh, one day I got to put that on the shelf because one day it's going to apply to me. And the greatest thing about being a grandparent is that you have a second chance to do it again. Do it right. You know, so those of you who are grandparents, take the word, hide it, and give it to your grandkids. I have 6, and I'm blessed. I need 4 more to round out my 10, so I keep telling my kids, come on, I need 4 more, I need 4 more. So they're not listening to me. They're like, no, no, no. Because, see, I could love them, spoil them, rotten. I mean, rotten. And then give them back. All hyped up with sugar, and they love grandma. And that's okay, because they got to deal with it, not me. So I'm totally blessed with what God has done, is doing, and will continue to do in my life. I read a poem a couple of years ago, and this is what it said. It says, if you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it's yours. If it doesn't, it never was. But if it sits in your living room, messes up your stuff, eats your food, takes your money, and it doesn't appear to realize that you set it free, you either married it or you gave birth to it. I don't know how many of you can identify with that. One of the things that I want to share with you today is about developing values for your children. There's a real familiar portion of Scripture found in Deuteronomy 6 that has to deal with children. And I'm going to read it, and you can follow along. Deuteronomy chapter 6, starting in verse 1. It says, these are the commands, decrees, and regulations that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you. You must obey them in the land you are about to enter and occupy, and you and your children and grandchildren must fear the Lord your God as long as you live. If you obey all his decrees and commands, you will enjoy a long life. Listen closely, Israel, and be careful to obey. Then all will go well with you, and you will have many children in the land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Listen, O Israel, listen, O Santa Rosa. The Lord is our God, the Lord alone, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home, when you're on the road, when you're going to bed, when you're getting up. Tie them to your hands, wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. This particular portion of Scripture has to do with where God had just taken the Israelites out of Egypt. Now they had wandered, and now they're going to be going into the promised land. And so the Lord is preparing them. He says, this is what you got to do. You're going to be going to a new place. You're going to be starting fresh. How many of you love that we get to start fresh every New Year's? They had just crossed the Red Sea. They had just had all of their enemies destroyed. So it's like they were just like, this is a brand new house. This is, how many of you ever moved into a new house and say, okay, you know what? This time, no dirty dishes in the sink. This time, no towels on the floor. And then, give it 3-4 months and there you are. But God is telling them, You're going to start fresh. You're going to do this different. And the Lord gives them some rules for basic living. And then he said, this is what is required of you if you're going to succeed in this land. So I'm going to give you a couple of different decrees that the Lord gave to these men and women specifically for them and their children. So the first thing the Lord decreed, he says, learn about me yourself. Learn about God yourself. God says, learn my statutes, learn my laws, learn about me. And if you want to be a good or even a great parent, if you want to rear godly children and grandchildren, you must first learn about God yourself. You have to get to know God personally. For you can teach your children the difference between right and wrong, the difference between doing what is good and doing what is better. How are you going to teach your grandchildren and your children about getting the most out of life if you haven't learned about God yourself? See, what are you going to use as your guideline? Now, let me ask you, how well do you know God? See, that question was posed to me when I was 17 years old at a bus stop in East LA. A woman came up to me, and I went 12 years to Catholic school. I learned about God every day. And there I am, I'm a senior, dressed in my uniform, and a woman comes up to me and says, do you know God? And I looked at her like, knucklehead, here I am in my uniform. You know, I go to Catholic school. You can spot a Catholic school girl, right? Not for the bad, for the good. And so when she came up to me and said, do you know God? I was like, I got all defensive. Well, of course I know God. I go to Catholic school. I have my religion book here. You know, and I go to religion class every day. And she said, no, do you know God? And I'm like, what? Of course I know. And I started, giving her all of the reasons why I knew God. And she said, no. You're not understanding me. Do you know the God who can change a drug addict? Do you know the God who can change an alcoholic? Do you know a God who can change a gang member? Do you know the God who can change a prostitute? And I looked at her and I'm going, I don't know what God you serve, but that is not who God is. And she was like, what do you mean? God changed my husband. He did 15 years in San Quentin as a drug addict, and now he is out, and now he is clean. And I'm like, I live next door to a drug addict. My brother's a gang member. I've got the connection across the street from me. God doesn't change people. And she went on to tell me how God had changed her husband, changed her life, and she just kind of like threw my whole theology out of whack by asking me if I knew who God was. You need to ask yourself, how well do you know God? Do you know his word? Do you have a personal relationship with the Lord? The day that my grandchildren learn how to feed themselves, man, it's a day of celebration. Those of you who are grandparents or parents, I remember so clearly being with my grandson, and I have 4 grandsons and 2 granddaughters. And, those of you who are thinking, well, it's not that big of a deal to have your grandchildren feed themselves, but it really is. Just for them to turn over and just for them to sit up, and it's a big deal. So when you're a baby and you're sitting in a high chair all by yourself, it's a big deal. So this is all new stuff. Because, see, my grandson had spent a long time looking at his hands and looking at his fingers and going like that and being all tripped out on his own hand. And, so when he gets to sit in the high chair, it's a big, big thing. So I remember I was sitting there with him, and I put some Cheerios in front of him. Because, that's like the first, you got to have Cheerios. And the day that he was able to get it and pick it up and look at it and then put it in his mouth, it was like, whoa, that was a big thing. How many of you parents can say, yeah, you remember? That's a good stuff. That's a milestone. And then I gave him another one, and I gave him another one, and I got such a big kick out of watching him because he was having so much fun. He would look at it and then put it in his mouth and look at it, and then pretty soon, you have to say, okay, now you got to give one to Grandma. And he's like, he didn't want to share. He hadn't learned that yet. But because he had been studying his hand for months and flexing his fingers, eventually you got to get to the point where the kids actually feed themselves. Because, see, these hands used to just grab noses. These hands used to just grab necklaces and grab glasses. And now he got it together enough to feed himself. Putting his fingers around those little Cheerios and putting it in his mouth brings smiles and laughter. And I know that I kind of sound like a grandma. And the fact is that all of us kind of remember that point in time when our daughters, sons, grandchildren did that. Being able to accomplish feeding yourself is a big thing. And it's a big thing because guess what? They're going to do that the rest of their life. Not the same way, but they're going to feed themselves. And it's a big milestone because they have moved from needing someone to feed them to feeding themselves. And see, the first point of learning about God for yourself is actually learning how to feed yourself spiritually. Too many of us depend too much on getting spiritually fed by somebody else. You come here on Sunday morning like a baby and say, feed me. Feed me. I'm starving. Feed me. We're living on the nourishment given to us by other people. Some of you live for the Christian radio or the TV or your pastor or your youth leader or your small group leader. You depend on Christian concerts and conferences and retreats. I feel so sad when I hear people saying, I dragged myself to this conference. I dragged myself to this retreat. I came in an ambulance. What are you doing? Starving yourself till you get to a conference or you get to a retreat. Because basic food is fundamental. It's for living. It's okay for a baby to be fed by someone else in their early days. We expect that. But many followers of Jesus are dependent on an older Christian to feed them spiritually. Just like with my grandson, it shouldn't always be that way. We need to teach you how to feed yourself. And in order for your children to do that, you got to learn how to do that. If they never see you reading your word, if they never see you setting yourself apart and praying, if they never see you doing different things for yourself, how are they going to learn how to do it for themselves? It'll never happen if we don't do it. See, because kids love to copy. Don't they love to copy? How are they going to pray and read for themselves if they don't see us do it? See, many people who have belonged to Jesus for many years are still babies when it comes to feeding themselves. So when things happen, and they will, and they do, it's not your fault. It's her fault. It's his fault. It's their fault. It's everybody else's fault because you don't know enough of the word to know that God is growing you. You always want to blame somebody else. Like when my children used to fall and they would, hit the chair. You know what I would do? Is I would go up and I would go, bad chair, bad chair. And they would feel all good about themselves. It was the chair's fault that they fell. Now it's time to realize, it's time to grow up. It's not the chair. You were clumsy. You fell into temptation. You let your anger take control. It wasn't the chair's fault. It was your fault. And the reason that it's your fault that you blew it is because you haven't been feeding yourself. You haven't been full of the word. You've been full of other stuff, not the word. It's not anyone else's fault that you're dry. You know, we get all hangnails. Everybody gets a hangnail every so often. And you know, we do what we're not supposed to do. We bite them, we pick them, we do everything, you know, and hangnails, if you look at your hand, you can't even tell you have a hangnail. But if you hit it the wrong way, it hurts. See, the only way to get rid of a hangnail is to soak your hand in oil, and it takes away the hangnail. And it's the same way some of you have a hangnail attitude. You look good, but then it hit you in the wrong way. Yikes. What happened? You haven't been taking time to soak yourself in the oil of the Holy Spirit. You got dry. And because you're dry, everybody that comes around you hits you the wrong way. It's time to take a big step today and grow up. Grow up. You have to be able to get most of what you need spiritually from God himself. Most of what you need, especially as he speaks to you personally through his word. How you apply his word to your life. You need to learn something about God every single day. Every day, the Bible says that his graciousness and faithfulness is new every morning. Every morning, there's something new to learn about God. Don't abandon those great opportunities to hear from him through other people, like your pastor. Because every so often, you need to be around somebody who really knows how to cook spiritual food. But in the meantime, God wants to talk to you too. He wants to speak to you. He wants you to learn from him directly. There's no substitute for opening the Lord's love letter for yourself and every day finding a new message. Many years ago, the leadership team in Hayward and I went through John Maxwell's 21 laws of leadership. And when we did that, you know, it was a great opportunity, but the first law always stood with me. Always. And it's always here, and it's called the law of the lid. And the law of the lid says that you can never take anybody higher than where you're at. And some of you are parents and grandparents, and you still haven't learned how to feed yourself. How are you going to expect your grandchildren and children to do it? They can't grow any higher than you. You're going to be their lid. They're going to want to do something great for God, but then, oh, well, my mom and dad, they didn't do it. My mom and my grandma and grandpa, they didn't do it either, so I guess I'll just be satisfied here. If you grow, they grow. You grow, they grow. That's the law of the lid. They're only going to grow as high as you. So if you want your children and your grandchildren to turn out well, if you want to help them along in their faith to godly living, you got to learn the way yourself. That's the first great key to parenting. Learn about God yourself. The second key is you must live what you profess. Verse 6 says, these words are to be in your heart. In other words, the things you learn, you got to live. See, children, as I said before, are great mimickers. They just they copy everything. They love to copy what we're doing. When my daughters were little, I ironed, I washed dishes, I washed clothes, I folded them, and there they are, you know, two little mimickers, two little copiers. They want to do everything. Mom, I want to sweep. Mom, I want to iron. Mom, I want to wash dishes. I want, you know, and they wanted to do everything. And every time they were able to do some of the things, oh my gosh, they were so happy. I grew up in an era that said, don't do as I do as I say. It just doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't work. If it's working in your home, don't do as I do as I say. Be careful. Because as your child gets older, they will become resentful. And they will question you as a parent. Well, how come I can't do it, but you can do it? See, as I said, when I was 17, I came to Christ. And I loved being a part of the youth. In fact, I started the youth group in our church. And I ran it over 2 years until my husband made me turn it over to somebody else. But the greatest obstacle that I faced as a youth leader, and I continued to face as a pastor's wife and as a pastor, the greatest obstacle was the parent. They were the greatest obstacles to growing youth. Do you know how tough it is to try and teach the gang about the difference that Jesus can make in their life when their parents are here raising their hands, jumping, hallelujah, glory to God? They're one person here and they're another person at home. They say one thing here and they say another thing on the way home. Do you know how hard it is to teach young people that there are things that they need to avoid in life when they see their parents pursuing those very things? If you want your children to be honest, then you need to be honest. Tell them the truth and keep your promises. If you want them to avoid watching some of the junk that's on TV, why don't you avoid watching some of your junk on TV? See, you look at them and you're going, oh no, look at that. Oh, that's horrible. That's trash. And yet you watch your novelas, you watch your daytime soaps, you watch your nighttime soaps. You wouldn't miss it for anything. I mean, DVR, thank God that's here, because you DVR everything. I remember being hooked to soaps. Because after I had my son, I had to stay home. And I didn't know what to do because I had never been home during the day until I had my son, and then I had to stay. And it's like, okay, now what do I do? Oh, well, turn on the TV. And I got hooked. Now, I don't know if these soaps are still on, but I would watch 12:30, Ryan's Hope. 1 o'clock, One Life to Live. 2 o'clock, General Hospital. 3 o'clock, I guess they're still on. I don't know. I don't watch them. But I do remember being hooked, so hooked that here I am taking my son in a stroller through Target. And like, oh my gosh, it's time. Go to the TV section, plant myself there, and there I am for the next 2 hours. I couldn't do anything because I was hooked. This was before DVRs. If you missed it, you missed it. I had to be there. And I remember the Lord speaking to me one time. Well, he spoke to me a lot of times, but this particular one time having to do with soaps. Because I found myself talking about the characters like if I knew them. Do you know what Erica did? Do you know that she's getting divorced and she's getting remarried? No. And we're talking to other people, and I'm sure that I sounded like, man, what kind of a family does she have? Or friends. But I was talking about the people on TV. And I remember one time when I was watching General Hospital, that this good man was married to this horrible woman. And then this good woman was married to this horrible man. And I remember watching, I said, man, I wish those two would get together, and then these two would just be out of it. And I remember saying that even to myself. And it was like such a shock that the Holy Spirit said, oh, is that what you want? Is that what you really want? And I'm like, no, it's just TV. Nope. Whatever you watch goes in here. it goes in here. And it begins to change our value system. It begins to change how we feel about certain things. In reality, would I really want that person to divorce their husband to get with somebody else? Not in reality, but on TV, I was justifying it because it's just TV. But whatever you watch gets in. And once it's in here, it affects your value system. It changes how you think. That's why our kids don't always understand why we say we do it. They can't have the latest video game of killing and shooting and all of that, and yet we'll go to the movies and we'll watch horrible, horrible movies. And they don't understand. They're not justified. No wonder they can't understand why we can't buy them the latest video game, why we can't buy them the nicest pair of tennies when they see us running to the store to buy the latest style or the latest this or the latest that. Our connection and our attitude toward money and our ability to influence is very strong in our family. If you fail to set the example of putting God first in your life, don't even think your children are going to do it. Don't even wish it, because it's not going to happen. They're going to follow you. If your family consistently gets the message that money and stuff is more important to you than anything else, then you're going to have a hard time providing leadership for them in other areas. You can't tell them something you're not doing. Because you know what? Kids know us. Your kids know you better than anybody. You can't tell them you need to put God first and then they see you not putting God first. If your children see you cheat, they see you lie, they see you gamble, they see you not being forgiving, they see you watching movies and TV with what could be called pornography, then don't be surprised when they do. Just don't be surprised. Some parents are like, oh my God, my kids did this, my kids did that. Where did they learn it? You think you're hiding. We all know our parents. We know our parents. They can't get over on us. I mean, I'm the oldest of 9. I get together with my brothers and sisters and go, oh yeah, that's mom. Oh yeah, that's mom. Can you imagine what our kids say about us? Oh yeah, that's mom. Oh yeah, that's dad. That's what they do. That's what they say. They say this, but they do this. If you want them to understand that who you are is more important than what you have, then you have to let them see you work more on your character than on your home, than on your job, or on your closet. If you want your children to be forgiving, then you have to forgive them. Some parents hold grudges against their kids for a long time. I know that I considered myself the queen of grudge holding. And the reason I considered myself the queen is because I got given the crown from my mom. I took it from her. I watched her and I was like, that's how you do it. I watched how she interacted with my dad and how she would hold a grudge against him and how she would just give him the silent treatment and how she would just ignore all 9 of us like we weren't even there. And she just went into her own little world. So guess what? When I got married, I did the exact same thing. I took her crown, gave my husband the silent treatment, treated my kids when I was mad at them like they weren't there. I did exactly what I was taught until I got into the Word for myself. And I had to learn how to change. I had to learn how to give up my crown. I didn't want that crown anymore. I had to learn how to forgive and how to let it go. You have to let forgiveness pass on to your kids. Your kids are going to hurt you. I don't think there's any greater pain as a parent than when your kids hurt you. But you got to let it go. You can't hold it over their head. Remember when you did this? Remember when you did that? What if God told you, remember, remember, remember? You also need to let them see you forgive those who have hurt you. If not, you're going to put them in a position to pick up an offense, a direct one or an indirect one. Now, a direct offense is when somebody comes and directly does something against you. But an indirect offense are the things that I used to do when I was in high school. An indirect offense is this. I don't know all of you, so don't get offended. But it would be like this brother said something about Josh. But I'm friends with Josh. So Josh tells me, do you know what he said? Now, me and him are friends until Josh tells me something that he said. So I'm like, oh, really? Pfft, I ain't talking to him now because he said something against him. I just picked up an offense that had nothing to do with me. And so now he's out. I don't even know who he is, but now he's out. And you know what? We did that in high school. And if you didn't graduate, you graduate today. Get out of indirect offenses. Stop it. So now this side can mingle with that side. And this side can mingle with this side. Because we strategically sit where we know we're not going to commingle with the people we don't want to. And if you picked up some offense, I've been doing this a long time. I know. You think I didn't do that? I did that. I knew exactly where to sit, and I knew exactly where they were sitting. It's time to grow up. Give up your crown. If you want your kids to be optimistic, then you know what? You're going to have to be like that. Some parents are so pessimistic. Everything is always doomsday. Everything is always the end. Dads, if you want your daughters to marry a guy who loves her, who respects her, and who respects her opinions, then let her see you treating her mom that way. Moms, if you want your son to marry a great girl who will honor and love him, then let him see you treating his dad that way. So if you want to be a great mom or a great dad, then you got to practice what you preach. And you got to live what you profess. I am super blessed. I've got a daughter-in-law that I absolutely prayed for, and I have a son-in-law that I am just like blessed with. I got one more to go. I'm praying for hers. But it's such a blessing when you have given your life and you see your kids' lives being blessed. The third thing, not only do you have to live what you preach or teach, but you also have to teach what you've learned. In verses 7 through 9, it says that we are to talk about God when we're rising up and laying down, when we're going out, when we're coming in. In other words, to be a great parent, you're going to have to teach it what you've learned and teach it at every opportunity. Every opportunity. When you're facing a tough time, don't just face it by yourself. Get your kids together. Get your family together and say, this is what's happening. We need to pray. And when God answers your prayers, then the kids are also a part of seeing God come through. My children remember. They can tell you time after time when we would get them together, whenever we had a crisis, whenever we had a difficulty, and we would pray. One time we came home from a conference, a world conference, and we were excited. We had just come back, and we're going, and we're coming home, and all of a sudden we see people coming out of our house. We're like, what? And then we see a for sale sign on our house. I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. The owner of the house had put up the house for sale when she knew we would be gone that whole week. And there were people in and out of our house all week long, unbeknownst to us. And that's what we came home to. And I remember so clearly, I was in shock. My husband was in shock. But before we even got out of the car, we said, okay, everybody, let's pray. So my kids are little, 10, 5, 4, and we prayed in the car before we even got out. Before we said something we would highly regret. Because we also left our dog there in the house. We had somebody come and feed him every day and let him out, but he was there. So it was just, it was crazy, but every crisis, we saw an opportunity, and then just how the Lord moved. And every time we had a difficult situation, they were a part of it. Now, there are things that they didn't need to know every detail. They just needed to know the faithfulness of God. They needed to know that God was going to work things through. Parents, teach your children the importance of work. Teach them that a job worth doing is doing right. When you're driving down the road and you see a sunrise, you see a sunset, remind them of the beautiful world that God has made and how He made it for us. I never let a rainbow go by, ever, without reminding my kids the faithfulness of God. And what He said so many years ago, He still stands by it, and how He is faithful. You know, we started a tradition in my family about 20 years ago. And if you don't have traditions, make some traditions, because they're good, they're great. And we've continued this even though my husband is no longer here. I get the kids together and we watch a movie. And it's called A Beautiful Life. Not It's a Wonderful Life. It's a beautiful life. And it's French. So there's English subtitles. And it's about a movie about a little boy who, it was during the time of Hitler, and they were in concentration camps, and the parents were separated, and the mom took the girl. No, I'm sorry, there was no girl. The mom was separated in the women's camp, and the father was separated in the men's camp, but he took the little boy with him. And he made concentration camp a game. And the game was that if you could be quiet when the soldiers came, that he was going to get a tank, because he always wanted a tank. And so every time the soldiers came, he hid and he was quiet, quiet, quiet. And then after they left, he would come out. He goes, do I get a tank today? No, not today. You got to do this another day. You got to do this another. And this went on and on and on throughout all his days. And I'm blowing it, huh? No, you got to watch it. But at the end, he gets his tank at the expense of his father's death. And we watch that every Christmas to remind us that it's not about what we got or what we didn't get. What's important is family. It's family. And you have to remind your children, and sometimes you have to remind yourself, that it's all about family. If you want to be a great parent, learn about God yourself. If you want to be a great parent, live by what you profess. If you want to be a great parent, teach what you've learned. And fourth and lastly, if you want to be a great parent, stand your ground. See, there's a lot of things in this world that the enemy is going to use to distract us and destroy us. And he uses a lot of tools to get our kids. So if you want to be a great parent, then you're going to have to guard them with all your strength. And there's certain ways that we have to guard them, because there's going to be things that you cannot allow your children to wear. Sometimes I look at some kids walking down the block and I'm saying, how in the world did that parent let their kid out of the house like that? There are some women that I want to ask them, can I buy you a mirror? I don't know what they see, They probably just see this. They don't see the rest of them. But there's going to be things as a parent you're going to say, no, 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 you take that off. Nope. Change. There's going to be things that you're not just going to be able to not only not allow your children to wear, but there's also going to be places that you're not going to be able to allow your children to go. Will they rebel? Will they get mad? Will they say, you're not my friend? Will they say, I hate you? Oh, yeah, get used to it. Get used to it. There's going to be things on TV and movies that you're not going to be able to allow your children to watch. And you know, one of the best things about being a parent that my husband and I found is that the things that we didn't want our kids to do, we couldn't do. We could not do. So we never had HBO in our house. We never had Showtime. We never had anything like that. Because, you know, after a certain time, everything comes out. So what media is telling us is that it's okay if you're an adult, you can watch it, but if you're a child, no, you can't. And we said, no, it's not okay for you and it's not okay for us. So if you can't watch it, we can't watch it. If you can't watch a movie, we're not going to watch it. And if we can watch a movie, then you can too. The only movies that we watched were movies that we could all watch together. And if my husband and I were watching a movie, it wasn't on HBO, and it wasn't on Netflix, and it wasn't on Showtime, or it wasn't on any of those cable things. You can't allow your children to do something that you are not going to say, I can do it, but you can't do it. There's going to be things that you can't allow in the house, and you got to stop it. One of the things that I didn't allow, this is my personal opinion. If you want to allow it, that's okay. I didn't allow worldly music. I had 4 teenagers in my house. And that was the rule, no worldly music. Did I know that they listened to it at school? Yeah. Did I know that they listened to it with their friends? Yeah. But in my house, there was not going to be any. So I remember coming home when I wasn't supposed to be home. And I remember coming into the house and going, what is that? Walked into my son's room and quickly exposed him for listening to worldly music, and then promptly took it and threw it in the trash. And he goes, but I bought that with my own money. Oh, well, then you got to learn how to listen to better music. I also had another value in my house. No locked doors. I just do not like locked doors, because a locked door says you're not allowed in my life. Now, I could be taking it to the extreme, but that's just me. So one day I came. My son was the one that tested me the most. I think that's why he's pastoring now, because now he has to reap everything he sowed. And I remember one day I came home and I was knocking, because you always have to knock. You can't just walk into your kid's room. You cannot. I don't care if they are your kids. You got to give them some privacy. They knocked when they came into our room. We knocked when they went into their room. So I knocked, and the door was locked, and I go, let me in. Wait a minute. Are you changing? No, wait a minute. I go, open the door. Wait. And I open the door. Anyway, make a long story short, he came home from school that next day. He had no door. You may say, man, she's a mean mom. I'll take the crown. I'll be the mean mom. Because my kids knew the values. They were instilled in them. And they're still walking in the Lord. See, the day will come. The time will come, hopefully, prayerfully, when your children are adults and they're living on their own with their own family, when you will become one of your children's best friends. When they'll call you and say, Mom, what do I do? Mom, how do I handle this? But when they're young and they're living at your house, they do not need you to be their friend. They need you to be their parent. They need a parent. And there's so many that I see parents, they mix it up and they want to hang out with their teenage daughters or their teenage sons. Get out of their life. Let them be. Let them grow up. Let them make mistakes. You made enough. Let them make some. Be their parent. Don't dress like them. Don't talk like them. Don't act like them. Don't listen to their music. Don't do any of that. Be their parent. They don't need a friend when they're teenagers. They need a parent. Stand your ground on your values. And then lastly, very quickly, prepare for the trying times because they're going to come. There's going to be days when your children are going to ask you, why? Why do I have to go to church? Why do I have to act like this? Why do I have to dress like this? Why do I have to, why? And, you know, there's going to come days where they're going to try you and they're going to test your values and they're going to rebel against everything that you've tried to teach them. And you got to prepare for those times because they're going to come. They're going to come. What you got to do is you got to discipline them when they're young. Proverbs 13:24 says, those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. Proverbs 29:15 says, to discipline a child produces wisdom, but a mother is disgraced by an undisciplined child. One of the saddest things I see is when parents are calling the youth leaders. They're calling their pastors. They're calling the police because they're having trouble getting their teenage children to obey. And they want them to fix the problem. They want the church. They want the children's church leaders. They want the church leaders and the ministers. They want the pastors to fix their kid. You can't fix what you did not teach your children when you had an opportunity. It's your responsibility. If your children are young, do it now. Teach them to obey. It's your responsibility when they're young to teach them. The Bible says that a parent who does not discipline their children does not love their children. If the value systems in your home are not going as well as you think they should be, it would be a great time right now to stop and say, you know what, I'm going to have to make some changes. What happens in your home carries out on how your children act in public, how they present themselves in their schools, in their church, and in their community. The values modeled at home are the values that your children are going to take into the world. I determined early that I wanted my children to have a value of telling the truth. So I would tell them all the time, no matter what. No, I don't care what you did. I don't care what you said. I don't care. I just care that you tell me the truth. All the truth. Not a portion, all the truth. You can tell me anything, just don't lie. Just don't lie. I wanted them to have the value of truth, and I also wanted them to have the value of communication and not resort to cussing. See, because I hear these young kids today, and oh my gosh, we're talking 8, 9, 10, 11, and their mouth is full of profanity. And I didn't want my kids to go that way. So I told them, I want you to be able to say whatever me and your father say, you can say it. No matter what it is, if we say it, you can say it. Now, could you do that with your kids? When you get mad, when you get frustrated, when you get angry, when you feel betrayed, can your kids say the words that you say? Or would you have to say, get out of the room? If I say it, you can say it. The bottom line is that teaching values to our children starts with our values. We can't teach them something we don't have. We need to understand what our values are. And if we lack values, then we need to change them. It's important that parents periodically evaluate their convictions, because what we believe is right for today may change for tomorrow. Billy Graham said, children will invariably talk, eat, walk, think, respond, and act like their parents. Give them a target to shoot for. You cannot be a positive influence without being a spiritual leader, and there's only one way to be that, and that's that you lead by example. Each of you as a parent, you've been given a team to manage. You're the coach. You're the coach of your team. Whether you just have 1 or 2 or 3 or like in our family 9. My parents were coaches. And my dad wanted us to be a winning team. But he had to be the example first. My husband and I wanted our children to be a winning team. We had to be the example. We had to be the example. We had to learn about God ourselves. We had to live what we profess. We had to teach what we learned. We had to stand our ground. And then we had to prepare for trying times. I know some of you are thinking, but I don't have kids. Well, today is the day you get convictions before you have kids. Some of you are saying, but I don't know how. Well, you know what? You have pastors, you have leaders who can help guide you in developing strong convictions. I don't know what this message will do, if it'll even make a difference. But I pray that in the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, that your children and your grandchildren will be able to say, I want to be just like my mom. I want to be just like my dad. You know, I was at a funeral last night. Pastor Jose was there. And the sons got up. And it was a memorial to Chucky's mom, Pastor Chucky's mom. And the sons got up and they said, before we end this, they both said this. They said, if I could be half the man you are, the way you treated my mom, the way you were so patient and so loving, if I could be half that man, then I'll be blessed. Could your kids or your grandkids say that about you? If they can't, be honest with yourself. If you don't think they could, then this morning, you're going to have an opportunity to change and transform. And it's here at the altar. And if your kids are with you, then bring them. Because you know what? This is where forgiveness starts, right here. I don't know when the last time as a parent you ever asked your child for forgiveness. But if you've never asked him for forgiveness, today's a good day to start. Stand with me. And I'm just going to not make a big old plea, but I'm going to say, you know what? If the Lord has spoken to you, if you feel like today's the day you want to make a change in the values and convictions in your family, if you need to make a change within you, then I'm going to open up the altars for you to just come. Just come. Not a lot of fanfare. Just come. And if your children are with you, then bring them. Because today is the day that we're going to make changes. Today is the day that we have to change. If we're going to raise up strong children in the Lord, we have to change. Stay right. I want you to grab your children, grab your spouse. If you're here alone, then start letting the Holy Spirit teach you and show you the areas that you need to change.